Horses are terrifying. What do you think of when you hear the phrase autistic special interest, when you think about these intense interests that autistic people are known for? If you'd asked me this question a few years ago, I would have said maths. I would have imagined like a crazy manic genius scribbling away on his whiteboard, running his fingers through his hair. I would have thought of buses, planes, trains, space, science. I wouldn't have thought of me and my little projects. I think for most people, unfortunately including medical professionals, it would seem, if you look at the rate of underdiagnosis in autistic women, what comes to mind is a man, probably a white man, Sheldon Cooper, basically. Someone who is super into STEM. You know, for me that kind of made sense. It fit with my little understanding of autism, that it was somebody who was very logical, socially withdrawn, maybe a bit cold, had a brain that was like computer-like, a robotic sort of person. That all just seemed to make sense, and I could package that up in a little autism box in my brain and tie a nice bow on it, and it all fit. And I don't know if I even ever thought about the fact that girls could be autistic, because unfortunately I think in our world logic is associated with masculinity. When I was quite young, probably about 7, I recognized that one member of my family, an older relative, was a little bit autistic, I may have said at the time, because he reminded me of a boy at my school with Asperger's who was into science. But I think the only reason I connected this older relative with that person, I don't think it was to do with the social things that I saw, it was to do with the fact that he makes model airplanes. Even though actually, when I think about it, my relative, his main interest that he's had throughout his life, aside from the planes, has been literature and Shakespeare and playing the guitar and classical music. But it was the model airplane hobby that stood out to me as kind of an autistic sort of thing to do. But it's not the reality of autistic special interests, and if you watch a program like Love on the Spectrum, you'll just see how broad and varied those interests can be. Yes, there are people who are interested in dinosaurs and Thomas the Tank Engine, but there are also people who do creative things. Who would have thought it? People who are artists, people who play the piano, people who are obsessed with words and have amazing vocabularies. Oh dear, I can't word. I actually do have quite an interest in words, believe it or not. So what are the most common special interests in men and women, and do we have any differences in our interests? I found this super interesting study, and I thought I would look at what they found, and I will compare it to my own special interests that I've had throughout my life. In the study, via social media, 171 parents of autistic girls and 163 autistic boys. I mean, I don't think the parents had 171 daughters and 163 sons, but you know what I mean. The individual parents of these individual children, I mean, maybe some of them were parented by the same, but anyway, completed a survey about their children, answering lots of different questions, but one of the things that they looked at was special interests. So actually, very few differences were reported regarding communication and social strengths and difficulties of boys and girls with autism. And no differences were reported in the number of boys and girls on the spectrum with special interests or repetitive behaviours, but significant differences were found in the types of special interests, with boys and girls showing interests along traditional gender lines. So the most common special interest that was found in the survey was the same for both boys and girls, which is pretty crazy. Can you guess what it was? It was using technology, which I admit is a pretty broad category. 85.9% of the boys had using technology as a special interest, according to the parents, and 64.9% of autistic girls. You can also use technology in order to engage in a lot of different special interests. Like, one of my special interests has always been making films. Like, say you're using a computer to look up information. In fact, would that still count as using technology being the special interest? It's the tool that you're using to engage in the special interest. I think maybe I'm thinking about too much, but maybe not. I pretty much always use computers in some way within my special interest. I enjoy using computers and just being very focused. I suppose you just sat still, you're very focused on one thing, you're focused on the screen. My brain seems to really like that. We first had a computer from when I was 4 years old, I think. The beige fat computer with the chunky keyboard. It was great. And I wrote down all of my special interests that I'd had in my life before I read this study, and this is what I said as my first point: playing computer games that gave me control and freedom. I think control is very important to me for relieving anxiety. Basically any sort of game where I could kind of choose what I wanted to do and had creativity. I didn't like playing games that had like a very rigid structure, which might be different from, you know, people's stereotypes about autism. I really love The Sims. I've heard jokes be made. I think I've even made the joke before as well that Sims should be on the DSM-5 for like diagnosing autism and girls being obsessed with The Sims. One summer holiday, my mum had to limit the amount that I played The Sims. She was like, you can do 4 hours a day. I wouldn't brush my teeth, I wouldn't get out of my pajamas, I'd just be like straight on The Sims and time would just fly and it was just amazing. I loved it. Why do we like it so much? You can control the social interactions from both sides. I don't know, it was just so much fun and I loved the people and creating the stories about those people's lives more than like building stuff. That kind of the interior design and stuff like that kind of bored me. I also loved Neopets, being kind of entrepreneurial on there and trying to save up and squirrel away as much money as I could and get all these fancy items. That was really fun as well. And my first one that I loved was called Ollie's Draw a Story, and you had to like draw pictures and then those pictures would be integrated into a plot. We were gonna go on a ship, draw the ship. The next common special interest in males at 27% was transport. Only 2.3% of the girls had an interest in transport. A lot of people think of Thomas the Tank Engine when they think of autism, and if only 2.3% of girls, according to the study, are interested in transport, then you can maybe see how you might think of other things rather than autism if that's kind of the stereotype you have burned into your brain. I hate public transport. Why do autistic people like transport, okay? Can you explain? If you do, explain to me why. If you did as a child or you do now, it's cool. Everyone's allowed to like whatever they like, but just from a personal perspective, it stinks. Everything's got a horrible musty smell. Have you smelled the toilets on a train? I would love to not have to smell them no matter where I sit. I can smell the toilets on a train. Ugh. Aeroplanes, stinky. The toilets when you flush them, the most terrifying loud noise ever. I hated it as a child. I mean, I'm sure people don't have a special interest in aeroplane toilets, so maybe this is a stupid thing to say, but it's unreliable. It's not there when you want it to be there on time. It's an autistic nightmare. It's noisy. There's lots of people. The special interest is not being on public transport, Meg. I think I did like Thomas the Tank Engine as a child, though, I will say. The girls, after technology, the most common interest, singing, dancing, and music, with a pretty big 52% engaging in this special interest. On my list of interests, I'd written choreography, and I'd also written writing songs as well, which I still like to do sometimes. I can't remember how old I was, between 8 to 10, I went to South Africa to see my family, and my granny took me to a performance called African Footprint, and I just absolutely loved it, and she bought me the CD. That was probably the most well-used CD in history. I still get the songs in my head, and I decided I was gonna redo African Footprint, and it was serious, and my friends had to get involved, and I got so intense and obsessive about it, and we had to choreograph to this whole 40-minute thing, routines and props and costumes, and there were costume changes. I was very, very intense and serious about it. It became to a point where it actually did kind of stress me out and cause me quite a lot of anxiety, and it became like a control thing, like everything has to go perfectly right. I always wished that playing guitar was a special interest. And also ballet. I did do ballet and I really liked ballet. I knew I had an intense focus that I could apply to things, but I just also knew that I couldn't really choose what I applied that to. And sometimes I would really wish that, oh, wouldn't it be great if I could put all of my energy into ballet? It's like you don't always get to choose. The interests choose you. You know, next up for boys, it's maths and science, 26.4%, so we can kind of see where the stereotype comes from. For girls, it was only 12.9%. I was never all that interested in science. That's not on my list. I was definitely more on the creative side of things. Apart from psychology, I am interested in psychology. It does make you wonder though, because in order to be involved in this study, you did have to be officially diagnosed with autism. You had to say like which medical professional had diagnosed you. They didn't verify it though, but you did have to say that your child was diagnosed with autism. And potentially the boys who did fit the stereotype would be more likely to be diagnosed, and the boys who didn't, who were maybe into more creative things, would be kind of under the radar like a lot of autistic girls. So maybe it's kind of skewed in that way, and that's why we're seeing more of the stereotypes, or maybe kind of the stereotypes are there for a reason. Who knows? Interest in men can definitely be very varied though, and these things are just not fixed in black and white, or blue and pink I should say. The next highest, both for autistic girls and autistic boys, was animals, and then also reading and books. Animals were a bit higher for girls at 49.1%, but 30.1% of boys also had an interest in animals. And I was thinking to myself, did I have an interest in animals? And I was like, no, animals smell. Like, I'm a vegan. I don't want to hurt animals. I care about the suffering of animals, and obviously it affects our planet as well. It affects people too. The way our food industry is trash. Let's not bother going on a spiel about that. A lot of autistic girls have the interest of horses. That's kind of maybe becoming a slightly stereotypical interest of an autistic girl. Horses are terrifying. Get out of my face. No. No. My non-autistic half-sister really likes horses, and the one time I went to go watch her riding a horse and I filmed it, she fell off the horse. I've ridden a horse twice in my life. It was terrifying. I did not like it. I did not like the feel of them moving beneath me, and I felt so high up. And the other time, I don't know if it was a pony, something that was angry, and it tried to like throw me off. It went like ooh, up in the air, and I cried, and then we had to go home. And I wanted to get some sweets, so I was mad. So like no, I'm not a horse person. I never like collected horse figures or anything like that. So I was like, no, animals have not been a special interest of mine. I don't want them to die. I don't want them necessarily always in my space. I like cats. Dogs are terrifying. But then I remembered that I had an interest in snakes. I had all these little plastic snakes, and my granny had a big book that was about snakes, and apparently, I learned all the different names and the different names of the snakes that were native to South Africa because I lived there for a year and a half from like between like age 4 and 6, and my granny like showed me and told me about it, and I became interested in it. The first time I met my dad's new wife, I won't say stepmom because she doesn't like that, we spent the whole night I think telling her about all my different snakes and showing them all off to her. And then I think I also, before that, when I was younger, even before my dad left when I was 4, I think I was interested in dog breeds, I think. So I just said dogs are terrifying. I knew all the names of the different dog breeds or something like that. I don't know if I had figures of them or like a poster or what it was. I don't know. That would have been seen as relatively normal, I think, at that age. You just become like a sponge at that age. You store so much information. It's a shame that you don't hold on to it all, but I suppose your brain needs to prune some of it out to make room for some more useful stuff than loads of dog breeds. I have no idea what dog is what. I know a pug. I know a Dalmatian. I know a greyhound. I know a Staffordshire Terrier. I know a no, I wouldn't recognise a Labrador. I know a sausage dog. Reading in books was 32.5% for boys, 45% for girls. And again, it's like, oh, but what if I had been reading books about snakes? Would then reading still count as a special interest? Because often you can read non-fiction books about your special interest, so it's difficult to know. What I would have been interested to know is how many people are interested in literature, are interested in reading fiction, because for me, I do like reading non-fiction, and I do like reading non-fiction about things that I'm interested in. I mostly read fiction. We went on a family holiday to Greece once, and I took a bag full of books, and my mum was like, you will not read all of those books. And I ran out of books. I literally read the whole time, and my mom was like, is this person okay? Is she having a good time? And I was having a great time, just sat there reading. So I suppose this is where you'd be like ticking yes on this survey really hard. And then I ran out of books. I was like, this is all your fault, mother. So thank you, because I would have packed more books if it wasn't for you. And we had to wait for our like airport transfer to come, and I had nothing to read. Nothing to read. Should have just reread one of them. Anyway, all of the books were by the same author. They were all by Mallory Blackman, and on that holiday I read what I still say is my favourite book of all time, Noughts and Crosses. And I often do that. I will get kind of stuck on the same voice. If I like someone's writing style, I'm like, yes, you are nice. I am in the zone of the way that you write things. I am now going to read every single thing that you have ever written, and I am going to enjoy it. And that is what I do. So it's like my brain gets stuck on that channel. You know, with the whole autistic inertia, how you don't like switching between tasks. I don't like switching between authors. I hate it when you finish a series and you've got to change to a new series. It's like everything sounds like it's going to be painful to watch. You're like, give me more of the same. But a lot of autistic people do really love reading, are really ahead of their age for reading, and that was a thing for me. Like, I was behind on my education because I lived in South Africa and I moved back to England when I was 6, because in South Africa you start proper school at 7, I think. So I had been kind of playing and more and doing more small children things and being out in the sun and having a good time and probably giving myself skin cancer in the future. But I was ahead on my reading still. I got praised a lot for my reading, and apparently I was very expressive when I read. I don't know why I'm bigging myself up as a 6-year-old, showing off about 6-year-old me and my reading skills. I know a lot of other autistic people can relate to that. Obviously there are also some people who struggle with reading and don't have that experience and are still autistic. For girls, the next most popular was arts and crafts, 43.9%, and boys it was only 15.3%. I didn't do arts and crafts, but I did love videography and video editing. Again, could filmmaking fall under that? It's a creative kind of pursuit. It's a craft. It probably falls more into that category than technology. And I also loved writing, which doesn't really fall under any of the other categories here. That's probably the closest one. I suppose it is a craft. Again, I love writing poems, I loved writing plays that I would perform with people, again, writing songs, writing stories, writing novels that would get a few chapters and I'd draw the book cover and have the best intentions and not finish. But I did finish a lot of albums worth of songs and make a whole cover and do some dreadful recordings of these songs and put on concerts and stuff. I have written since then. I have finished, how many books have I finished now? I've like 2.5 books I've finished. I've had a couple of short stories published and I've attempted to publish one book and I'm supposed to be querying agents with another one that I finished. And I just finished something and then I'm like, yeah, but it's done now. I'm like, I could do better, and then I just haven't bothered to finish querying the book because I've moved on to doing something else. I don't know. Help. Executive function again, I suppose. I know a lot of other autistic women are into knitting and crocheting and making, things with their hands. Anything with my hands, I'm like, get me out. No, I cannot do it. I did try and take up knitting for a while because my granny was so good at knitting. It looked like her hands were like on 2 times speed. They were like crazily fast and it was so cool. And she showed me how to do it, and then I think I played one of the grandparents in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory when we did it at school, and I would sit there knitting in our pretend bed while the play went on. I didn't continue. I don't know if I ever actually knitted anything, but I did quite enjoy it. It's quite soothing. People find it kind of like a stim. Collectibles were also really high for both. It was 22.7 for boys and 33.9 for girls. So I've always had a love, I don't know if anyone could relate to this, I've had a love for something when it is the same thing but a different colour. It just blows my mind. I just love looking at it. I'm like, you're the same, but you're different. Obviously, we don't want to encourage too much materialism here, but it is cool. It is undeniably cool. And now it's great. I love collecting toys with my son and like looking at what other ones we could get. I'm like, oh, which one should we get next? And it's just, I have so much fun with it. I don't want to play with them. Don't make me play with you. I don't, no, I'll sit here and read my book and I'll watch you. I try sometimes, but it is painful. I do try, but yeah, I do really, really love collecting, and I like to try and get them secondhand whenever I can as well, which is quite fun. But I mean, sometimes, they hold their value, man. Probably because all the autistic people are scrambling to buy them, but like, yeah, look, those little T-Rexes. I love it. He's into dinosaurs, and it's like, oh, it's super cool. Yeah, this one, look, it's got such a red tongue. And like, yeah, they're like the same design, but they're a different colour. Oh, if I could just have every colour. We don't need too many T-Rexes, we've got a lot of T-Rexes in our lives. And I loved having different Tamagotchis when I was little, but you could like connect those obviously, so it was kind of useful to have more than one. Useful. I try to be quite minimalist now as an adult and like from an ethical point of view, but I really do appreciate a good collection. I had lots of teddies when I was younger. I agree with a lot of other autistic people who say, they see them as like real and like having personalities, and I would go to charity shops and car boot sales, and in my head I had like a teddy rescue, and I was going to rescue all these teddies and give them all the love, and at some point they probably all went back to the charity shop, which is sad because I also then would go through phases where I was like, I'm being selfish, I'm going to give back to the earth, and then like donate all of my stuff as a child. I was very intense. Interest in dinosaurs was a bit higher for boys. It's 14.7 as opposed to 8.2% of the girls. I didn't mind a good plastic dinosaur when I was small for sure. I never would say it was a special interest, but I certainly thought they were cool. And I remember going to the Natural History Museum in London, and it was with my step-cousin, and we were kind of given the option to get something from the shop, and I got a set with plastic dinosaurs and eggs in it, and it was like a thing that, oh, she's getting a notebook because she's older, and it was like, oh, she's more mature, but she was only a year older than me, and it made me feel like really babyish. But I was like, the dinosaurs are cool, I'm gonna get the plastic dinosaurs, and my son still has the plastic dinosaurs in the little plastic nest with the plastic eggs. He still has it, so good purchase. Bet that she still doesn't have a notebook, does she? Bet she doesn't. I like a good notebook as well, it's fine. It's interesting to think about why there is such a gender difference. I think it kind of makes sense that you can't really become interested in something unless you are exposed to that thing. And I mean, how many girls are gonna have a bedroom that's got buses and trains painted all over it? That's kind of a thing that's all over boys' clothing when you have a baby boy, something that boys are exposed to. I'm looking right now at my son's little cover-up thing when he has meals, and it's got London London buses and taxi cabs all over it, and like probably most people wouldn't choose that for a girl. Obviously all the things that are my special interests I had to see at some point and be exposed to at some point in order to realise that I was interested in them. And animals were kind of relatively high for both. You can imagine like a little boy having a jungle animal themed room or a woodland animal themed room, and it's the same with a little girl, so like that makes sense. I imagine probably if you broke that down there might be different animals that they're interested in. You know, girls would be more interested in some girly animals like cats and dogs and horses, I suppose, and there might be more reptiles on the boys' side or something like that, with like spiders, poisonous animals, sharks, things like that, and maybe more whales and dolphins on the girly side. I don't know. It would be interesting to see a breakdown. Like singing and dancing being a special interest for girls, like you might be taken to dancing classes as a little girl. I went to ballet at a very, very young age. You are exposed to that. As a boy, it's kind of probably like discouraged a bit, like, oh, you don't want to do that. You don't want to be seen as a guy who likes dancing. One day are these stereotypes gonna leave, please? And unfortunately with the science and math one, I think boys probably are exposed to that more. Again, like space is often on little boys' things and not really on little girls' things. They might have some cutesy stars, but like serious space for men. And in Peppa Pig, you know, George, the little brother pig, is interested in space, and Peppa's like, but space is boring. Because I think we do see men as more intelligent. I think if you had to do a survey of the world, that would definitely be the response that would come back, and more logical, which is sad. Who knows, maybe there is something in men's brains that makes them go, buses are beautiful. So I think our takeaway here is, don't worry, you're not an imposter just because you don't like trains, you don't like horses. Autistic special interests can be anything. It's about the intensity. And we should think about it like that rather than thinking about, oh, it's probably going to be trains or it's going to be space. No, it could be anything, but it's just that intensity of focus, that feeling that you just can't wait to get back and do it. You can't stop thinking about it. You can't stop talking about it. You talk at people about it in monologues. You stop eating and drinking because all you want to do is this thing. You forget about all your bodily functions because you need to just do this all the time, and you love it, and it's calming and relaxing, and it helps you to kind of recover from the other things that you have to do that you don't like so much, like be exposed to difficult sensory environments and social environments as well. Indeed, it has been suggested that diagnostic assessments may need to include examples that are typically associated with traditional female interests, a suggestion supported by this study. Surveys used for diagnosis on the intensity of interests rather than the type of special interests may also aid in understanding of the presentation of ASD in girls. If you want to continue your journey of exploring the possibility that you could be autistic, if that's a path you're on now, or if you're just interested in general, maybe it's a special interest for you, you can check out my video on masking and how do you know if you're masking. Might enjoy that one.